How do you work with angles created by intersecting lines? This X figure may look familiar to you, as it shows up in many geometry problems. When two lines cross, they form four angles. If you take any two of these angles, the combination falls into one of two categories. The pair will either be a set of vertical angles, or they will be a linear pair. The properties of vertical angles and linear pairs both stem from the fact that circles have 360 degrees, and straight lines are half of 360, or 180 degrees. We can use this information to show that vertical angles are equal, or more accurately, congruent, and that linear pairs add to 180 degrees. Let's take a closer look at how to work with angles created by intersecting lines. Before we jump into discussing vertical and linear pairs, we need to talk about some vocabulary and notation, specifically the way in which we talk about the values of angles and how that is written. In geometry, there are two words that we use often: equal and congruent. When we say that two things are equal, we are generally referring to numbers or variables. For example, 4 is equal to 4, and 2x is equal to 6 when x is equal to 2. When we talk about the value of an angle in geometry, we are referring to its numerical value, and we call this its measure. For example, the measure of this angle is equal to 30 degrees. This is written as measure of angle A equals 30. Let's say we have two angles A and B, and the measure of angle A equals 45, and the measure of angle B equals 45. Then we can write measure of angle A is equal to the measure of angle B. These two angles are equal because the numerical value of each angle is equal. If we know that two angles have the same measure, then we say that they are congruent. Congruency generally refers to non-numerical things, such as angles, segments, and shapes. Remember, the measure of an angle refers to its value, numerical. Congruency refers to the actual angles, non-numerical. Now we're ready to talk about linear pairs. Here is a line segment. If we keep the left endpoint stationary and rotate the segment around one full rotation, we can trace a circle. With one full rotation, we've gone 360 degrees. Let's extend the radius in the other direction by rotating the radius halfway. Half of 360 is 180. So lines have 180 degrees. So what is a linear pair? If we extend a ray from the line segment, we can create two angles, A and B. Together, A and B form a linear pair. The angle addition postulate states that the sum of two adjacent angles is equal to the measure of the larger angle they form. Angles A and B are adjacent, or next to each other, and form the larger angle that is the original line. So by the angle addition postulate, the sum of A and B must equal 180 degrees. Let's do a practice problem. Say angle A and B are a linear pair. If the measure of angle A equals 120, what is the measure of angle B? First, set up an equation. We know that since A and B are a linear pair, they add to 180. So we can write measure of angle A plus measure of angle B equals 180. We're given that the measure of angle A equals 120. Substitute this into the equation, and then subtract 120 from both sides. And we're left with the measure of angle B equals 60. Now let's move on to vertical angles. Here we have angles A and B, which form a linear pair. If we extend the ray in the other direction, we form two more angles, C and D. B and C also form a linear pair. Since both pairs add to 180, we can set the expressions equal to each other. To simplify, subtract the measure of angle B from both sides, leaving us with the measure of angle A equals the measure of angle C. This means that angle A and angle C are congruent. The key point here is that vertical angles are congruent. Let's do a practice problem. Say two lines cross and form angles A, B, C, and D. If the measure of angle A equals 75, what is the measure of angle C? A and C are vertical angles, so they are congruent. This means that they have the same measure. Since the measure of angle A equals 75, then the measure of angle C also equals 75. Let's review what we've learned. Linear pairs are two angles that form a line. Key point, linear pairs add to 180. Vertical angles are opposite angles formed by two intersecting lines. Key point, vertical angles are congruent. If you found this lesson helpful, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button. Still have questions? Let me know in the comments.